Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're venturing into the pretty complex world of psychopathy.
And our guide for this exploration is Dr. Robert Hare's, well, really groundbreaking work, Without Conscience, The Disturbing World of the Psychopaths Among Us.
Yeah, so this deep dive, it's built on key bits from Dr. Hare's book. It's like a foundational text, really.
Definitely.
Right.
And it aims to shed light on a personality disorder that's often, clouded by myths and, frankly, sensationalism.
Our goal here is pretty simple, actually. We want to pull out the crucial insights from these pages.
Help you understand what psychopathy really is at its core.
Right. What it is, what it gets mistaken for, and, why understanding this stuff actually matters in your life.
And just to give some immediate context, it seems psychopathy is about as common as schizophrenia.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, but its impact, arguably, on society, personally, economically, it's probably much wider.
Now, we should probably say up front, this topic, it can be unsettling to talk about.
It really can. Our goal here isn't sensationalism, though. It's understanding.
Exactly, because, look, the reality is, statistically speaking, you're quite likely to encounter someone with psychopathic traits at some point.
That's true.
And recognizing some patterns, well, it can be really important for your own well-being. Physical safety, emotional health, even your finances.
Absolutely. Protecting yourself.
Okay, so let's dive in and unpack this.
Let's start maybe by clearing things up a bit. Defining psychopathy and tackling some common myths.
Good idea, because when people hear psychopath, they often jump straight to, like, the famous serial killers, right? The really extreme examples from movies.
Exactly. The Hannibal Lecters, the Norman Bateses.
Yeah.
That kind of thing.
Yeah. But the book really emphasizes that many, maybe even most people with these traits, they aren't in prison.
No, they're living among us, often using charm, manipulation. That's how they navigate the world.
So the stereotype is just a tiny, tiny part of the picture.
A very small part. The core characteristics, as Hare lays them out, are quite specific.
Okay, like what?
Well, think profound self-centeredness, a real callousness towards others' feelings, a complete lack of remorse or guilt for causing harm, a deep, fundamental lack of empathy.
So they can't really feel what others feel?
Not in the way most people do, no. They function without what we'd call a conscience.
Right.
And because of that, they really struggle, or just completely fail, to form genuine, warm, emotional connections with people.
It's interesting, too, that Dr. Hare comes from this background of experimental psychology and cognitive psychophysiology.
Yeah, studying the link between mental processes and the body's responses.
And that scientific approach really shapes the book, doesn't it? It focuses on observable stuff, biological factors.
Less on the psychodynamic explanations, which he felt didn't have enough solid evidence behind them. Now, the book does mention some really disturbing cases. Pastelakis and Hunt, who videotaped a murder. Horrific. But it's crucial, the book argues, to differentiate them from individuals whose actions seem more tied to severe mental illness.
Like Geen or Kemper, Berkowitz, Dahmer.
Yeah.
People whose sanity was heavily debated.
Exactly. Even if they were found legally sane. The point is, the underlying reasons for the behavior can be very different, even if the actions look similarly awful on the surface.
Okay, and this is where it gets really complex, right? The origins. Where does psychopathy come from?
It's not simple. It's tempting to just blame it all on a terrible childhood, poverty, abuse, neglect, that sort of thing.
Yeah, that seems like the obvious answer sometimes.
And sure, some people with psychopathic traits do have those backgrounds, but the book makes a strong case that for everyone like that, there's another who grew up in a seemingly stable, even loving home.
With siblings who turned out fine?
Exactly. And think about it, most people who do have awful childhoods do not become psychopaths.
Right. That's a really important point.
So while early experiences definitely shape us, they aren't the whole story here. Not by a long shot. The causes seem much more tangled, complex.
Okay, so the book then shifts to what it feels like, to actually encounter someone like this.
That gut feeling.
Yeah. That something's not quite right here, but I can't put my finger on it feeling.
Let's talk about some of the real-life examples in the source. First up is Ray, the prison con artist.
Ah, Ray. His story really shows that manipulation in action, even inside prison walls, and how charm can cover up a total disregard for rules.
It's a chilling look, isn't it? Inside prison, you expect order, but then there's this weird detail, the mismatched shoes.
I remember that, like size 9 on one foot, size 12 on the other, or something bizarre. Was it a message? Who knows?
Maybe just exerting control in a strange way. But then his actual manipulation getting transferred to the kitchen.
And immediately starting a still, brewing alcohol right under the warden's nose until it literally exploded.
It shows a willingness to take huge risks without seeming to care about the fallout.
Right, and even after solitary confinement for that, what's his next move?
Straight back to scheming. Trying to get into the auto shop, even trying to rope the host's father into getting him a parole job.
Total self-interest, zero shame.
And the prison staff's reaction to that job request, they weren't fooled.
No, they'd seen it all before. Their experience gave them a much clearer picture than the host had initially. That jaded perspective was actually accurate.
Ray's lying was also something else. Seamless. Contradicting himself without batting an eye.
Smoothly changing the subject. And if you refused him, that nasty side came out.
Yeah. And remember the fake university transcript? Even when caught red-handed, completely unflappable.
Just wow. Effortless lying, no embarrassment.
Then there's Dan, the charming deceiver. His angle was exploiting Traveler's loneliness.
Preying on Elsa when she was vulnerable, new in town, Dan's story shows how fast they can fake intimacy to manipulate someone.
It's a classic tactic, isn't it? Moving in fast, gaining access, gaining control.
But the red flags were there. Things Elsa missed at the time.
Like never being invited to a supposed place.
Exactly. And those weird, unexplained things showing up, cartons of tape recorders, multiple TVs, where did they come from? Where did they go?
It screamed fabricated life. And the whole UN translator identity. Completely made up.
And the worry Elsa felt when he didn't show up. It shows how strong a hold he'd gotten over her emotionally so quickly.
A real testament to their manipulative skill.
And finally, the twins, Alice and Ariel. Such different paths.
Ariel, successful.
Yeah.
Alice, instability, drugs, theft, prostitution.
Alice's story really highlights how that lack of empathy and those early behavioral issues can lead to such a destructive life, affecting the whole family.
The differences were there early on, weren't they? Alice seeming to enjoy ruining Ariel's things. Aggression, no consideration, early signs of lacking empathy.
And the parents, Helen and Steve, just torn apart, trying to figure it out.
Is she mentally ill?
Yeah.
Or just bad? That constant question.
The financial drain, the emotional toll, clearly immense.
And Helen just couldn't let go trying to keep Alice out of prison, despite everything. It shows how complex those family bonds are, even in these situations.
Yeah, and how hard it is for loved ones to accept it might be more than just bad choices, a deeper disorder.
So these stories, they give us a feel for it. But let's break down those core characteristics more systematically now, based on the book.
Okay, first one. Glibness and superficial charm. This isn't just being friendly, is it?
Not at all. It's charm as a weapon, as a tool. The source mentions someone saying they have a good two-line opening on any subject, but nothing more.
Shallow.
Very. Like the inmate with a horrific record, just laying on these seemingly sincere romantic lines in a bar. Total disconnect.
Or people liking Jeffrey McDonald despite the horrific accusations. That charm can really mask something dangerous.
Key takeaway. Charm doesn't equal trustworthiness. Not even close.
Okay, next. Egocentricity and a grandiose sense of self-worth.
Basically, the world revolves around them. Rules are for other people.
That Diane Downs quote, "The world continued to revolve around her." Chilling.
It captures it perfectly. They feel entitled superior. Like the inmate rating himself an all-round 10 would have said 12, but that would be bragging.
Almost funny if it wasn't so typical.
And you see it in court sometimes, criticizing their own lawyers, firing them, thinking they know best against all evidence.
Right. Okay, pathological lying. More than just fibbing.
Oh, yeah. It's pervasive. Almost like breathing, as one person put it. I lie like I breathe.
Wow.
Remember Jack's interview in the book? Theatrical, contradictory, clearly hadn't learned a thing from his massive conviction record. Almost bragging about being irresponsible.
Like truth just isn't a concept that matters to them.
Pretty much. Which leads to the next one. Lack of remorse or guilt.
This is maybe the scariest part for many people. No conscience.
And they can be incredibly blunt about it, just stating calmly, no, I don't feel guilty.
Even when faced with the harm they've caused.
Absolutely. They rationalize, he spends a few months in a hospital and I rot here.
Yeah.
Or they blame the victim entirely. The guy only had himself to blame.
Denying consequences, minimizing them.
Exactly. Abbott's comments about his victim,
Yeah.
just callous. And using excuses like memory loss or multiple personalities like Kenneth Bianchi tried. Anything to avoid responsibility.
Okay, shallow effect. What does that mean exactly? Knowing the words, but not the music.
That's a great way to put it. The colorblind analogy works well too. They can define sadness or fear, tell you what it is.
But they don't feel it inside.
Right. They often watch others for cues on how to react appropriately in social situations, almost like acting.
And there's brain science behind this, too.
Yeah, the study showing they process emotional words more like neutral words. It suggests a biological basis for that lack of emotional depth.
Which connects directly to callousness and lack of empathy.
Deeply connected. Indifference to the rights and suffering of others, even family.
The example of the woman letting her boyfriend molest her daughter, treating family like possessions, it's horrifying.
It highlights that fundamental disconnect from others' emotional lives. Their focus is on themselves, their possessions, their needs.
And deceitful and manipulative behavior almost goes without saying at this point.
It's practically their operating system, a natural talent for lying, for getting what they want from others.
That phrase, duping delight, the idea they actually enjoy fooling people.
It's unsettling. Think of Jean Jones, the nurse convicted of killing infants, constantly twisting the truth, contradicting herself, seemingly with ease.
And that motor mouth philosophy. If you throw enough shit, some of it will stick.
Yeah, a cynical, calculated approach. Wear people down with lies and manipulation.
Then there's impulsivity, acting without thinking.
I did it because I felt like it. That really sums it up. No thought for consequences.
Like Gary Gilmore wanting to be executed, explaining his murders as just venting rage, no deeper reason.
Just living for the moment, consequences be damned.
And that impulsivity often leads to poor behavioral controls, right? Flying off the handle easily.
Very reactive. Weak breaks, you could say. Minor slights can trigger huge reactions, violence, threats, verbal abuse.
But then they can snap back to normal really quickly.
Surprisingly quickly, yes. Like Cleckley's psychopathic psychiatrist and his periodic destructive binges, followed by periods of seeming normalcy.
Thrill-seeking fits in here too. Trained chicken, bar fights just for the adrenaline.
Exactly. Part of that impulsivity and weak control. Which brings us neatly to the explicit need for excitement thrill-seeking.
They actively look for risky situations.
Often, yes. Just for the buzz. Remember the woman saying carrying drugs through airports was the ultimate high?
Wow. So crime isn't always about the money, it's the excitement itself.
For some, absolutely. And despite all this chaos they cause, there's a profound lack of responsibility.
Always someone else's fault.
Always. They use family, friends as safety nets, bail them out constantly without caring about the cost to those people.
Like the woman skipping bail after her parents put up their house. Just no regard.
None. Or the driver with tons of dangerous driving convictions saying it takes two to have an accident. Never their fault.
And often, these patterns start young, early behavior problems.
Not just kids being naughty. Often much more disturbing stuff.
Animal cruelty is a big red flag mentioned in the book.
Yeah, horrific examples like the cat noose, using puppies for baseball practice, and cruelty to siblings, too.
Parents might miss these signs early on, or explain them away.
It's easy to do, but recognizing them is important.
And these early problems often just continue, escalating into adult antisocial behavior.
There's usually a clear line, and they tend to be criminally versatile, trying a bit of everything, not specializing.
Like G. Daniel Walker in the book, with his wide range of abuses.
Or Jeffrey with the least, the manipulation, the theft, the exploitation. And her parents saw something.
Those strange, flat eyes. But the psychiatrist was totally charmed.
Happens all the time. Which ties into their superficial interpersonal relationships.
All charm on the surface, but nothing deep.
Exactly. Can't form lasting, meaningful bonds, people or resources.
Jeffrey saw Elise as just a connection for stuff he wanted.
And Terry? Multiple partners, zero concern for his kids. Just shallow, transactional relationships.
Okay, let's shift slightly. The book talks about white-collar psychopathy, too. It's not just street crime.
Absolutely not. The manipulation, the lack of conscience, just as damaging in a suit and tie, sometimes more so.
Gambling, borrowing millions with no collateral, no intent to repay. Prime example.
And the manipulation wasn't just about money. It permeated everything. And often, they get away with it or get lighter sentences.
Portraying themselves as victims or misunderstood geniuses, like Gall did.
Right. And Rosner's analysis of Grambling's family life, that relentless drive for wealth, using people, total lack of emotion. Chilling.
Targeting vulnerable professionals. Doctors, therapists.
And the con artist named Man of the Year with fake credentials. It shows how far the manipulation can go.
Then there's Dave in the corporate world. Plagiarism, stirring up conflict, sucking up to bosses while wrecking the department.
It shows how these traits can actually help someone climb the ladder short-term in some environments.
And potentially linked to huge financial scandals. SNL crisis, BCCI.
Book suggests it's plausible. High-level psychopathic traits could contribute to that kind of massive fraud. It's lucrative, maybe less risky than street crime.
The lawyer offering to use the psychopathy checklist to discredit a witness. Scary how it can be weaponized.
Very. And Grambling looking down on common criminals.
Yeah.
That distinction society sometimes makes between property crime and personal crime. It's complex.
Okay, let's talk about the language of psychopaths. It's not just what they say, but how.
Exactly. Pathological lying, yes. Manipulation, yes. But also those contradictions, the logical inconsistencies in their stories.
Like the example from 48 Hours. Things just don't quite add up.
And the research on bilateral language processing using both sides of the brain more, maybe linked to a more detached, less emotional way of speaking.
And those hollow words, knowing the dictionary definition of love or fear, but not the feeling.
That's crucial. The colorblind analogy again. They learn the words, use them, but lack the underlying emotional comprehension.
Relying on listener reactions as cue cards.
And the brainwave studies back this up. Emotional words process differently, more like neutral ones. Robert Olson's contradictory self-descriptions are a good example, too.
It paints a picture of someone living below the emotional poverty line.
A shallow emotional life, yeah. That bilateral control might play a part.
Like the interview example, evasive answers, flirty redirection instead of directness.
Difficulty telling a straight story, even about something simple, like a bar fight, who punched whom. It gets muddled.
More communication breakdowns than usual and different from, say, schizophrenia.
Right. Media often gets this part right, coincidentally portraying them as kind of two-dimensional.
So how do they actually do it? The manipulation tactics weaving those flies in the web.
They're often skilled at spotting and exploiting weaknesses. Moliere's quote about praise, a tool to make people swallow anything.
The traffic stop example, charm and confidence overriding the rules.
It's the show. Looks, charisma, distractions, knowing which buttons to push, using stage props sometimes.
And exploiting weak spots is key.
Definitely. The con artist saying they size people up, find the weak spot, and tighten the screws.
Lecter and Starlingham poking at her fear of being common. Classic example.
Even professionals, like prison staff, can get manipulated by patients who know how to play the game.
Then there's that weird deadly attraction thing. People drawn to notorious killers.
Courtroom groupies, pen pals for Bundy, Gacy. It's bizarre. Confusing notoriety with fame, maybe.
Laurencia Bembenek. Bambi.
Yeah.
The public support she got. It's like a macabre dance.
Willingly participating sometimes. And they're masters at distorting reality for their victims.
Making people doubt themselves, deny the obvious, psychological denial.
Like the husband refusing to believe his wife is cheating, despite all the evidence. They can make you question everything.
What about the idea of being born bad, like in the bad seed?
That raises the nature versus nurture question again. Parents baffled by a child showing these traits from day one, despite a good home.
The book mentions early warning signs: theft, aggression, animal cruelty, early sex, vandalism.
And the example of Susan Kitten in the toilet, cruelty to her sibling, chillin' stuff.
The DSM-IV had limits capturing childhood psychopathy, but there are cases of horrific acts by young kids.
It's a spectrum, though. Not all kids with these signs end up the same way.
And the lack of attachment, is it a cause or a symptom?
The book suggests it's more likely a symptom, a consequence of the underlying traits, rather than the root cause. Unfair to just blame the parents.
So environment shapes how it looks, but maybe not the core lack of empathy?
Seems that way. Social factors influence the expression, but the core deficits, lack of empathy, lack of conscience, seem less affected. The psychopathic clay is less easily molded.
Interesting point about psychopathy in gangs, too, how the traits might actually fit in.
Yeah, impulsivity, selfishness, manipulation, aggression. Sadly, those can align well with gang dynamics.
Which brings us back to the parents' agonizing question, what have I done wrong?
And the answer, regarding the core disorder, probably nothing. Parenting influences development, yes, but doesn't necessarily cause this specific lack of conscience.
So the really tough question, can anything be done? Treatment challenges. The Ann Landers letter about Denny.
That perfectly illustrates the problem. Denny was spoiled, hostile, didn't work. Family supported him. Why would he want to change?
Right. They often don't see a problem, lack insight, lack motivation.
And their personality is just resistant to change. Plus, they're good at manipulating therapy, blaming others, maybe even enjoying the lifestyle.
The studies showing therapy can sometimes make them worse, learning new tricks.
Alarmingly, yes. Therapeutic communities that work for others can backfire with psychopaths.
So skepticism about treatment is pretty high.
Very high. Though there are counter-arguments, like Joseph Fredericks mentioned, and experimental programs like in Canada are trying.
But the general advice for people involved with them is pretty bleak.
Recognize improvement is unlikely. Trying harder to change them can be dangerous, like we see in spouse abuse cases.
Which leads directly to, how do you protect yourself?
That becomes the main focus. First, know what you're dealing with. Even experts get fooled.
They're everywhere, not just prisons.
Exactly. Remember the eyes of a goat analogy, emotionless predator. Not necessarily evil, but dangerous. Trust your gut instincts.
Don't ignore that feeling that something's off.
Verify stories. Check credentials. Get professional advice for diagnosis and how to manage the situation. And crucially, don't blame yourself.
It's not your fault.
No. Be wary of power struggles they need to win, often at any cost. Think custody battles.
If possible, cut ties.
If it's safe to do so, yes. It's often the only way. Self-preservation has to be the goal.
Finally, let's touch on the ethics of labeling. It's a powerful label.
Hugely powerful. Accurate diagnosis is important, especially in the justice system for risk assessment. But mislabeling is dangerous, stigmatizing.
The psychopathy checklist is presented as a good tool, though.
When used correctly by trained professionals, yes. But it can be misused, like the psychologist trying to deflect blame for parole decisions.
Potential for lawsuits, too, for failing to diagnose someone dangerous.
Right. Parole boards often aren't surprised when high PCLR individuals reoffend, sadly. But an inaccurate diagnosis can be devastating, like the suicide example.
And the danger of diagnosing public figures from afar?
Huge danger. Need context, culture, careful study. Snap judgments are misleading, unethical.
Like Dr. Death predicting dangerousness without even examining the person.
Exactly. That lacks scientific validity, major ethical problems. Or misusing brain research to push a legal narrative.
So even an accurate diagnosis doesn't predict everything. Other factors matter.
Absolutely. But careful use of tools like the checklist can help reduce risks in the justice system. The ethical problems often stem from bad procedures or questionable practices.
Okay, so let's wrap this up. To summarize our deep dive into Without Conscience.
Psychopathy is this complex personality disorder. Specific traits, lack of conscience, manipulative style. It's key.
And it's way more than just crime. It has a massive, often hidden impact on people and society.
Hopefully you've gained a more nuanced view now beyond this simple, sensational stuff.
Right. And maybe a final thought for you to chew on.
Given how common it might be and the impact it has, how does society balance protecting people with the rights and maybe limited potential for change of these individuals?
And personally, what's our own responsibility in recognizing it, responding thoughtfully in our own lives?
Definitely something to reflect on.
And if you explore further, always look for credible scientific sources.